Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whenever you happen to be tuning in to the Welcome to My 10 podcast, I am happy you're here. Today we are joined by my friend Heather Begyn, and she's going to tell us all of the good things about her pregnancies, her twin pregnancies, having her twins at 27 weeks, their NICU stay, and all of the journey that went into that. I have been friends with Heather for a few years now. We met via Instagram. I feel like every time I'm on here, I'm telling you about another person that I've met on the internet, but that's how it goes these days. So it has been lovely to connect with people just like Heather. She was one of my earliest followers. I followed her back, and we have just become friends in the process. I have watched her go through her pregnancy with her daughter Harper, and then her twins, Madison and Mason, as well, and their birth at 27 weeks. She did a really great job of detailing their stay in the NICU and showing the behind the scenes of what that looked like. She also tells us the story about how she literally got married in a hospital bed to her now husband, Andy, as she was in labor with her twins at 27 weeks. Heather really is an open book, and she shares such a piece of her heart here on this episode. You will hear it just in the emotions that she has while recounting this story. And what I love is I have been friends with Heather for a few years and follow her and talk to her a lot. And there were things that I didn't even know that she shared here on the podcast today. She also gives some great tips on if you're going through a NICU stay or how to support people that are going through that. I don't have any idea what that's like, and so I'm very grateful for people like Heather who are willing to share that side of the story. Not to mention, Heather's just an awesome person to follow in general. She shares a lot of motherhood and what that looks like, especially with 4 young children, and the high highs, the low lows, and how she shows up for herself. But she really is a breath of fresh air, because I find myself so many times just nodding my head along to her stories because I so relate to what she posts all the time. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Oh, guys, it's 7:52 p.m. We all know it's my bedtime. But luckily, I just have to record this intro, and I am much more functioning for the episode itself. Anyway, that is Heather, and I hope you all enjoy this content, this episode, and I hope you enjoy Heather. Let's get to it. All right, love you. Hi, hello, hey, and welcome to my tent, a place to hear life experiences, different opinions, a range of journeys, and a viewpoint different than our own. A place to challenge our own thoughts, a space to learn a little bit, and I promise some fun along the way. I believe we're better when we let a range of people into our tents, so welcome to mine. All right, everyone, hello and welcome back to my tent. Today we have someone super exciting. I'm excited to chat with her and have her tell her story. We have Heather Begyn on the episode today, and she's going to talk about her family, pregnancy, twin pregnancy, and her NICU stay with her twins. She had a pretty long journey throughout all of that. She is an open book. She is amazing, and I'm excited to have her on. So Heather, welcome. If you just want to give a little intro on yourself, that would be awesome.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am Heather. I live in Iowa. I've lived in the Midwest my whole life, and I used to work in healthcare. I loved helping people, and I've always loved helping people and supporting people. So being able to share my journey and support others in this aspect is super exciting for me. Let's see. I really know. What about me?
There's a lot. I know this question's
it's like
always hard.
Somebody asks you, well, tell me about yourself, and you're like, your mind goes blank. You're like,
well, what do you want to know?
I like to, I own my own business. I own a virtual assistant business. So I do that from home. I did that while I worked. I did work out of the home until I had my twins. Since then, I've been at home, which is such a weird adjustment for me after I've always worked. I've worked since I was 14. So it's so weird to be home all the time and not be like going out of the home to go work for somebody or go do anything really. It's kind of a lot to leave the house with my gaggle of children.
Yeah, you have 4 beautiful children.
Yeah, my oldest, she's 7, going on 16. And I have a 2.5-year-old, and then my twins are going to be 1 in a couple of weeks. So
that's wild. It feels like yesterday that you announced that you were pregnant, and then you announced you were pregnant with twins, which was surprise. I know that was a surprise. The twin aspect was a surprise. Are there twins in your family or anything?
No, twins do not run in either of our families.
Right. You're like, great.
Yep. Right. Well, so my 2.5-year-old, she just turned 1. And then I found out that I was pregnant weeks later. It was so crazy to me. I have always found out early in my pregnancy that I was pregnant because I felt pregnant. I felt completely off. So like with my oldest, I found out I felt off around 5 or 6 weeks. Same thing with my middle child, Harper. It was about 5 or 6 weeks. With the twins, it was 2 weeks. I felt pregnant 2 weeks after, because I think there's so much. Twins are just like,
I was wondering maybe because it's double the hormones and...
I don't know the science behind it, but I know how I felt.
Yeah.
I was like, I told Andy, I go, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. I'll take a test, but I'm pretty sure this is happening. And I panicked. I was not prepared to be pregnant again. I had just gotten over postpartum, which doesn't really ever end, I feel like, for a long time. But I started to feel normal again. I was like, I'm feeling good. I had just finished breastfeeding. I was like, my body is my own again. And I was excited for that part of, because there's just like, it's so hard just being everything for another person. It's great. It's a blessing and it's so wonderful, but it's also very hard. So I was feeling so good. I was like, I feel like me again. And then, I found out I was pregnant. I was like, oh, this is rough. I was like,
well, thank you for saying that. Cause I think a lot of people shy away from talking about that aspect where it's okay to want those pieces of you back. And of course you love your babies, all of them, but rightly so. You were probably like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not a great person pregnant. I'm a very hormonal person. I get ragey. My husband is not a fan of me when I'm pregnant. So to find out. So my first pregnancy, I was the same way, but I never knew what it was. My doctors and I never talked about postpartum or even prenatal depression. I knew about postpartum, depression and all that. I had heard of it. I'd never known what I was 27 when I got pregnant. So or had my baby. So I was like, I don't understand any of it. And we never talked about it. And so I never knew that's what I was dealing with when I was pregnant. I just thought, oh, it's hormones, and I wasn't in a great situation at the time anyway. So it was just a lot going on. Harper, my doctor was like, I think you're going through some prenatal depression. And I'm like,
what the heck is
that? I was like, really? Like there's a reason? And she's like, yeah, no, you're not, there's nothing wrong. Like this is normal, or can be normal, and I was like, okay, well, that's good to know. Like, so he went through that pregnancy with Harper with me because he's, my oldest stepdad. So he's not her father biologically, but so he never knew that's what I was like before. But with Harper, he dealt with that and it was rough. It was rough for our relationship. It was rough for everything. So then when he found out that I was pregnant with the twins, which we didn't know at the time, but pregnant again, he was like, oh God, he's like, this is not good. He's like, we just started feeling good again. Like we started because postpartum, I still dealt with all the hormones, the feelings and all that. And so, I was feeling miserable. I have been pregnant before. First trimester was always rough for me. I was like, okay, I'm totally prepared to feel like crap. I was not prepared to feel that crappy.
Times 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything was double the work.
A young baby. And at the time, Avery was 5, 6. So she's still a little bit more quote unquote dependent, but or independent. but still that's a young kid who also just had a change in her life come with a baby sister.
And a baby brother. Her dad had a baby at the same time,
right.
and he has Down syndrome. So it was a lot. There was a lot of stuff happening for her, and she had a really rough time around that time. And then again after we brought the twins home.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of stuff we had to work through with her. To a point where I was wondering if we needed to see somebody like a therapist or somebody, because it was just horrible. It was like emotional all the time. Like everybody's emotions were high. Mine were like out of the park. So, and then you mix a 6-year-old, almost 7-year-old emotions, and then Harper, who was actually a rock star through all of it. Yeah, it was a lot of changes in a short amount of time for almost everybody involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was funny. We were going to save the announcement to our families till Christmas. When we got ornaments that said, baby, like it was, and we were gifting the ornament to our families as a surprise. We're like, yeah, surprise, we're having a baby. We weren't married at the time, but we had been talking about what our plans were. Like, we always knew that we were going to get married eventually. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. And
yeah, I mean, you had a few things that you were
a few things happening,
yeah.
So we told everybody, and they're all very excited. And then we had our so it was Christmas, and then we had our ultrasound on the 29th of December. So about 4 days later, we sat down in the ultrasound tech almost immediately. I worked in X-ray and CT. I did stent rotation and ultrasound. I have ultrasound friends. I know some things. I never did the schooling. I don't know all the things, but when it comes to babies, you can kind of see, what's going on. And so almost immediately I'm like, hold on a second. And in my head, I'm just in denial already. I'm in denial. I'm like, there's no way. No way. And then she goes, there's baby A.
Oh, you're like, oh my God.
And he said, you went white as a sheet. You look like you passed out for a second. And then he goes, and then I processed what she was saying. And he goes, like, freaks out and basically just stops like breathing. He's done. The ultrasound tech's like, you need to breathe over there. Like, you need to breathe. Like, don't pass out on me. She's praying, like, don't pass out on me.
Did you ever think or have any moments you're like, this could be 2 before you knew?
No,
you just.
No. Yeah. I mean, I had known that I was pregnant for about 6 weeks before I had the ultrasound. And in that time, I got COVID. I was sick.
Oh,
so
right.
I was in my first trimester. I was sick. And then I got COVID. I felt like I felt the worst in my life. I was like, this is not great. I barely left my bed.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was so hard because Annie travels for work. So between being so miserable and sick and then having Harper, who was just 1, and my oldest, it was not a good time. So I think my mind wise, I was not even processing, like, could this be more than one baby? Because I was just trying to survive at that point, like my brain was like, just focus on getting better, better. I think we got so quiet. We just didn't really know what to say to each other. We were like, okay.
2.
He's sitting there going like this, sighing like constantly over and over and over again. Like, you need to stop. Like, you need to let me process too. And all I can hear is you sighing. Like,
yeah.
But no, it was a really big shock. And we both were like, so out of the blue. Like I said, there's no twins in either of our families. So I never thought that we would be the people that have twins, So,
yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
And I know that pregnancy for you, like, first trimester was rough, but it was also pretty much the whole pregnancy, which we'll definitely get into they were born at 27 weeks, but
Yeah.
you had some complications and you had kind of a rough go the entire time. So if you're open to it, if you want to talk a little bit about the pregnancy part and what you were dealing with, and then ultimately when they were born, we can chat about that too.
Yeah. I would say up until like 13 or 14 weeks, I would bleed. I would spot a lot, and then cramping. And so I was always so scared. I think it was about 12 weeks. I went to the hospital. I went to the ER to get checked out because I was so nervous something was wrong. And that's how I felt the whole pregnancy. Nervous. I felt like something was going to go wrong. And I never felt that way in my other two pregnancies. It was alarming because I was like, I've been through this before, but, and I spotted my first pregnancy. So it was like 6 weeks. So it was about twice as long. And, it was painful the whole time, even when I wasn't that far along. I just felt like I wasn't feeling good ever. So it was really rough mentally for me because I was just, I'm sure you could probably relate in some of those ways too, but it was just like I was waiting for the shoe to drop. Like something was going to go wrong. So we got through that and I was feeling more relieved that I wasn't feeling with that. Not to say that feeling went away completely because, I think it was like 19 weeks. I went for my next ultrasound and they were like, we would prefer if you continue to follow up with us, but also go to Iowa City, which is about an hour away from here. Yeah. It is one of the best NICU children's hospitals in general in the country. So we're really blessed to be so close to such a great place. But we want you to see the fetal maternal specialist there, and just follow your twin pregnancy because you have history of postpartum preeclampsia, and with the twins that increases. Also, there could be some growth restrictions, things like that. So it wasn't really something to worry about. We weren't really worried. They didn't see anything on that ultrasound that they needed to worry about. We found out not with them what the gender of our twins were, but when we were in Iowa City. But so we follow up with them. We go there, and I kid you not, they gave me a heart attack. I had my ultrasound with the tech, and then like 10 people come into the room.
Oh God.
And I'm like, what is wrong? Like, there's got to be something wrong. No, they don't tell you that this is just part of the team. This is the team. They have a whole team of people.
Yeah, you're like, could you maybe have said there's about to be 17 people that come in here after I have an ultrasound of my twins? Like,
yeah, I was so scared. I was like, this is not okay. Yeah. What is happening? Turns out it was just normal. They have multiple doctors. They have like emotional support people there. They have like administrative people there. Like it was just like a whole people that work together on these cases. So it was comforting to know that I had so many people after they explained, like, this is so-and-so, this is why we're here. I'm like, okay, cool. That tech could have been like, hey, just so you know.
Directory before these people.
And here's where I want to make sure you're advocating for yourself, because they thought that I was further along than I was. Oh. So I told them, I go, hey, you have this date on my ultrasound, but I'm actually this far along. They're like, oh, well, that changes everything. Because they were like, they're not growing the way they should be, you know? And I was like, okay, but also this isn't the right date. So are you sure? And they were like, oh, that makes everything so much better. Oh God. But make sure that you're paying attention, like, which I know is hard because you're so overwhelmed. But like, I was glad I said something, because I was like, I would have walked out of there thinking that my babies were too small, you know. And to be fair, they did think that we were going to have issues because Mason's cord placement was, he had a marginal cord insertion. So when that happens, they're like, he might not get the nutrients he needs, so he might not be able to grow as big as he should, which I feel like I'm just such a small, I carry so small anyway.
Yeah.
That for me, I was like, how are two babies going to grow in my belly? And Andy, he didn't think that it was going to, he knew, he's like, I know that we're not going to make it to 37 weeks. They wanted me to make it to 37 weeks, you know.
It's a long time for two.
He's like, you're not going to be able to do that. And I was working, right? I was working a full-time job. I was running my side business on the side and the other two kids. And he's like, they're going to put you on bed rest. The whole time he was saying that. He was like, bed rest. That's what's going to happen. And if you don't know my husband, he's kind of a negative Nancy, you know, he'll just shoot off with I'm like, we're going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Day by day, Andy.
It's going to be fine. It was great. You know, like I walked away from that ultrasound actually feeling a lot better. They didn't see anything crazy. We found out you're having a boy and a girl, which I have the 2 daughters. So that puts me at 3 daughters and 1 son. So Andy was really excited.
Oh, little Mason, just bringing up the boy tally.
Avery cried. She was not happy. She did not want any brothers. She was wanting sisters, but she got what she got.
You're like, that's not how it works, Avery, but okay.
And that was good. But I was set to have another ultrasound about 2 weeks later at my doctor here. And I went in there and she kept going around and around and looking at the spot. And I'm like, that doesn't look right. She goes, well, let me just go talk to the doctor and then I'll be back. And I already know. I was like, okay.
That's not, typical.
All right. She goes, let me go talk and confirm something with the doctor. All right. Okay. So I'm in there by myself because it's my local. I didn't take anybody with me here. And Andy was out of town working. And I was like, okay. So I'm nervous. Like my blood pressure is probably up. And my daughter, the twin B, if you will, she had a mass on, and they couldn't tell if it was her spleen. They couldn't tell if it was her kidneys because everything is so tiny. And their ultrasound isn't as detailed as the one at the specialist. So
yeah.
So they were like, we're going to have to send you back up to Iowa City again. Okay.
Another hour.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, that's like close in relation, but that's taxing because that's a 2-hour, schlep.
And I was working. And so my job at the time, I only had so much. And anytime I took off work, it was such a big deal. I know that there are workplaces who are a lot more forgiving for things like this, but it felt like it was kind of a struggle anyway. So it's like, okay, well, last minute I have to go take off, and I would have to take off a whole day because it's like, you don't know how long you're going to be there. You'll drive there an hour, you find your parking, you get in there. The hospital employs like 11,000 people. Like it is a huge hospital. And so you're like, okay, well, and then I got an appointment with them. And then it was like appointment. And I'm like, well, I can't go back to work.
Explain, whatever, and bring the doctor.
And I'm not rushing. Yeah. And I'm not rushing. And if it was bad news, I did not want to have to worry about getting back to work. So it was like, I'm just going to take the day off. And luckily my mom went to all my appointments with me because, his schedule is so crazy. And then he wanted to save up the time that he had off for when the babies came. So I was like, I understand you can't come, but I needed to have somebody with me.
Yeah. Valid.
And they were like, well, she has a mass, but we don't know if it's got blood. It looks like it might have some blood flow, but we don't really know. And we're not really going to know until she comes. And so it was like, okay,
great. Thanks for the info.
They're like, we'll keep monitoring it. And if it changes, then, maybe we'll have to do something, but let's try not to worry about it because it doesn't look like life or death. Like it didn't look super serious that they needed to like really concern themselves, but they were following that. So Madison, she has this mass, and then Mason, he has this cord insertion, possible growth restriction issues. So, they're both giving me heck already. So I'm like, okay, we're just gonna figure it out.
And what was this, like 20 weeks?
It was about 23. Yeah, it was about 22 or 23 weeks. Because I found out at 19, then it was around 21 that I had the ultrasound, and then they sent me back up. So it was all very, pretty quick overall. So it felt like I was always going to appointments. I felt like I was always dealing with something. And then about 25 weeks, 26 weeks, I started having blood pressure spikes, and it wouldn't be consistent. But the doctor, they made me go through all the tests to see if I had preeclampsia and all that. I was monitored. I went to labor and delivery at my local hospital, was monitored, and I got poked so many times. And I remember my arms being just black and blue.
Yeah.
All the way up. So it was on top of that, I was dealing with the thought of all that. And then I was dealing with feeling off because of my blood pressure. I worked at a doctor's office / surgery center, and I would get my blood pressure checked every day. And you go to the anesthesiologist. Yeah. I would go to my buddy anesthesiologist and I'd say, let me see what my blood pressure is. And it was like a daily thing. I would have my mom who also worked there. My mom would take my blood pressure. It was usually not great. It wasn't super bad, but it wasn't great. I would have to call my doctor and go like, what do you think? This is what it is. And I'm like, well, it's not horrible yet. Let's just keep monitoring and try to stay relaxed. And I'm like,
you were like, relax. That's probably not helping your blood pressure by any means. Is this daily stress of monitoring?
Mm-hmm.
Probably
no,
also
it's like
wasn't...
it's like white coat syndrome. Yeah. It's like as soon as you see the blood pressure cuff, your blood pressure goes up.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I was just miserable, like the way that I was physically feeling, the way that the twins they were starting to move, and when they both moved, it was like my abdomen was trying to rip itself apart.
Oh my gosh. I cannot even imagine.
It was really cool to know that you were growing 2 humans, though. Like, it was really cool. And I was like, I never saw that in my future. I was like, never saw it, but it was so cool. I always try to remember that because it was such a rough pregnancy. But I never want to put that negative thought on it, but it's so
I think
cool.
There's a reality. We've talked about this so many times of gratitude and struggle coexisting. And it doesn't mean that you don't love your children so fiercely, but it's also okay to say it was really scary and I really struggled. I physically, mentally, it was a lot. And I think that's important to say too. And I think that's going to help a lot of people listening to this that are maybe, there's that thing that's, I should be grateful. Yes, of course. But I think you're also doing yourself a disservice by not also saying this is hard as hell. Yeah. And it was a really kind of scary time, which by 27 weeks is when you actually delivered your 2 babies.
Right. It was Mother's Day. I woke up the day before. We had taken my daughters to a trampoline park, and I didn't jump, didn't do nothing crazy. I was just watching, obviously, but I was really uncomfortable. To me, what it felt like was when they both moved. It just felt like they were both moving. And so I was like, not really thinking anything of it. And I had been craving a shake all day. I just wanted a shake. Well, I finally get these kids because Andy had to go back on call that night. So he was like, I need to get rest. I'm like, okay, great. So I put the kids to bed. Everybody's sleeping. I leave. I go, I'm going to go get shake. And so I'm out.
Did you put this on your story? I feel like I remember this. So you being like, I think want this shake.
I did. I was craving it, but guess what? Nothing was open except steak and shake. And I'm like, well, I mean, they got shakes, so I'll go there and get a shake. I got one. And I sat in their parking lot by myself in my car and ate my shake. And I was so happy. But I was miserable. I was feeling not great. I was like, okay, whatever. I don't know. For some reason, I fell asleep on our couch. And I just couldn't get comfortable all night. Finally moved myself to the bed because why not? And then it was about 6:30 in the morning and I had this really sharp pelvic pain. And I got up and I went to the bathroom and blood just pouring out. We have a bathroom in our bedroom. So the door was shut and I had opened it. I said, Andy. And he pulled the blanket over his head, Andy, ignored me. And I go... And I gave it another try because all of a sudden I'm falling and I go, Andy, and he shoots up out of bed and he goes, something's wrong. And I go, absolutely. I go, you need to get up and get the girls up because the kids weren't, they were sleeping.
Yeah.
And so I called the doctor and I said, something's wrong. I'm coming to the hospital. I didn't give him an option. I said, I'm coming to the hospital. Something's wrong. because, they want to know, well, how far along are
You're
you?
like, no, I am in the car. I'll
Yeah,
see you.
yeah, I literally had not packed my bags. I had no bags packed. I had nothing ready, really. I grabbed like sweatpants, threw them on. I grabbed a towel for the car and put to sit on.
Yeah.
I still crying. I couldn't stop crying. And my girls were freaked out. They were just like, they just woken up. They were like, what's happening?
Mom's hysterical. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I called my mom, who lives 2 minutes away from me, super close. I called her and she hears me crying. And she's like, it's fine. Do whatever you need to do. Bring him here. Like, I dropped them off and Andy sped to the hospital and they admitted me, and I was so happy because one of my main doctors that I saw was there. She was almost off. She was almost walking out the door, but she stayed. She stayed and she was like, it's going to be okay. She's like, we're going to get you stabilized and then we're going to send you to Iowa City in an ambulance,
Which is was the hospital that was an hour away, the special.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we were at my local hospital, which is about 10 to 15 minutes away from my house. And they're like, we're going to get you in an ambulance and we're going to send a nurse with you. So you're not by yourself because Andy couldn't go with me. They're like, he'll drive separate. I was in shock. So they can't get an IV in my arm. I'm still black and blue from the last time I was there. Finally get an IV and they put me on magnesium, which is supposed to help kind of try to slow things down. And I got shots and all these things to hopefully it's supposed to help support their lungs and stuff if they are born early. So, get me the one shot. I'm supposed to get another one in I think it's like 24-hour period. Like, I'm not even sure because I didn't get it. So I just know I got the first one. I got the first one.
Was everything just moving so fast? Do you even almost like remember, or was it like, what were you feeling as you're in this ambulance? Was that the longest car ride of your life? The shortest? Like, what was this whole, like, what was everything that was happening?
I just felt like I wasn't processing anything. I felt like everything right now, it feels like a blur looking back, but I feel like I shut down in a lot of ways. I feel like I didn't really process it. Once I got to the hospital and I knew people were taking care of me, I could stop crying. I was like, I'm in a hospital. Like, I have people here to help me. So it's like after that, nothing penetrated. And Andy, he's freaking out. He fidgets a lot. So he's sitting over there fidgeting and he's like shaking his knee and he's like, he is freaking out, right? And I just have to block him out because I couldn't process anybody else's feelings.
Well, you had 3 people technically to account for at that time.
Yeah.
You and your 2 babies.
Yeah.
You're like, I have enough to deal with over here, Andy. I'm just going to ignore you.
And everybody there was so amazing. I had the best people taking care of me. They were so nice. And they knew, I think, that I was kind of numb.
Yeah.
But they were just like, it's okay. And they're like, you need to feel the way you feel. And I'm like, they were so emotionally supportive.
That's huge.
Yeah. Oh. I know this stuff makes me cry, but anyway.
I mean, that is very valid. And I think that is a really important piece to it. Like, of course, you're medically trained to assist with your body, but you're in a moment that's extremely overstimulating and emotional and scary, and you deserve to be supported emotionally as well, because you're like, what the F is about to happen?
Yeah.
You're probably really, really terrified. And I'm so glad to hear that they were really supportive of you and how you're feeling too.
Yeah. And I think it's so great because I've heard lots of stories of people dealing with people who weren't supportive. And so I know that I was lucky in some ways because sometimes people in healthcare can get jaded and they cannot be that supportive. And that's coming from somebody who worked in healthcare. So like, I know that, it was amazing to have that in the whole way. So they loaded me in the ambulance and they went like 80 plus miles an hour, lights, sirens, all that. It was super uncomfortable while we were like in the city until we got on the interstate. because I was in a lot of discomfort. I was having contractions.
Yeah.
So I was on this magnesium, which makes you feel like you are 100 million degrees. You're on fire. It feels like you have the flu. And so I'm miserable, and every single bump and jostle.
Oh, gosh.
It was rough. And I was by myself. So with this nurse who was holding my hand the whole way, and they're continuously taking my blood pressure because my blood pressure has been higher,
Yeah.
And so I'm like trying to relax as much as I can, but it's almost impossible. Once we get on the highway, interstate, it's fine. The road's a lot smoother. It's not as uncomfortable. And, I can see all the cars parting behind me because I can look out the back window, right?
Oh, right.
And everybody's getting out of the way. It's Interstate I-80, which is a major interstate, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. On the other side of the road, I can see backed up traffic because a car caught on fire on the other side of the traffic going the other way. And all I can see for miles and miles and miles is cars backed up. And all I could think in my head was, thank God that's not on this side.
Right. That's not going the other way.
I mean, obviously they try to fit around them, but I was just thinking, hopefully everybody's okay, obviously, but also thank goodness that we're not stuck behind all these people when I'm already in this state where I'm not sure if we're going to be okay. An hour isn't a lot of time, but an hour is enough time for something really bad to go wrong too.
Well, and just to have to feel like that for any amount of time, but that extended amount of time. So were you in labor? Is that what ended up happening?
They thought that they could slow it down. They were like, you're not dilated. I mean, I was like a 1.5 centimeters.
Yeah.
It was like nothing.
You can be a centimeter or 2 or whatever for a while.
So they weren't necessarily worried that I was in labor, but they were worried that if it kept progressing, that I would be, and that we needed to get me to the hospital where I would have birth. Finally get there, and so we're going to get into the part where me and Andy get married in the hospital
I was just
room.
going to say, I was like, we cannot leave this story without also saying you proceeded to get married.
So we had one. Yeah. So it was May 8th. It was Mother's Day. And I'm in the hospital, and we were supposed to get married on May 19th. We had somebody, our friend who was going to marry us. We had our best friends who were ready to be our witnesses. And it was just going to be a small, intimate marriage with just us. And then we were going to have something later on. So it wasn't going to be a big deal anyway, but we had already gotten, so you have to get your send and everything, the court, and the state has to approve it, whatever. We had our paperwork. We just needed an officiant to sign when we got married. And so I told Andy before we left the hospital, me thinking of everything that I have going on, before I left the local hospital, I said, grab those papers when you get the bags.
You were always forward thinking. This is like epitome of a mother's job. Is like you're never not thinking 25 steps ahead, and you're like, Andy, you better get those documents.
Yeah. I said I go throw in pajamas for me. I'm not going to need a whole lot. Just throw in stuff. You can always go back and get more stuff later. I was like, just make sure you grab the paperwork. And so he did. And he brought it there. He met me as soon as I got in and situated. He pretty much got there right after. So really, he made really good time. It was funny, actually. He called my mom on the way up, and he was crying. He was like, what do we do? What do we do if something goes wrong? He's not an emotional person. So for him to say that to me, it was like, oh, okay. You really do love me, but no. Yeah. We get situated and all my stuff's good. And we're basically just waiting. We're hoping that we can monitor the babies and that they'll be good to go, stay on this medicine. And they were like, you're going to stay here until you have these babies. You are not leaving this hospital.
And TBD on timeline of that, they said.
We know, no idea.
Yeah.
It could be any time. It could be in weeks, 2 weeks. We don't know. During, you got to wear your mask. No visitors. I couldn't have my mom or my kids or anybody come and see me. So I was like, who knows how long this is going to be. And I was hoping that we could slow everything down, and that we could wait. I was like, being here would suck, but if we could keep him in longer,
yeah,
great. So while we're waiting, and I'm on this magnesium and I can't even get out of bed, catheter and all, super fun.
I got married with a catheter.
I'm sweating. It is not, I got washcloths all over me to keep me cool. But we're talking to my nurse and I go, hey, is there a way that you can get the hospital chaplain to come up here and just talk to us? And she's like, yeah, I mean, is everything okay? I was like, no, we were just wondering if maybe they could get us married because we wanted to be married before the twins came. And she was like, what? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, absolutely.
Like, real quick, just call him.
They called the chaplain and he's like, I'll be right up. And he came up and he was just talking to us, getting to know us and our situation. And he's like, I know that you're dealing with a lot. He's like, but it's really beautiful, that you guys want to, get married and all that. And he's like, we're going to make it happen for you. And we were so, so happy. And in the meantime, everybody's talking. The doctors and the nurses, they're all talking to each other about this. And it's like a thing. Like there's so many people coming in. They're like, you guys are going to get married. And we're like, yep, we're going to get married. And they're like, well, can we be witnesses? And
That's
I'm like,
so sweet.
Sure. If that's what you want, and then one of my nurse came in, she goes, hey, there's some doctors and nurses. They're helping, a
Plan
woman.
Your wedding.
They're helping somebody have their baby, but they were wondering if you could wait a little bit so that they could come and be part of it too. I'm literally stuck to this bed. I can't go nowhere. If they want to be present, that's fine. I was like, I can't have my mom and dad here. Andy can't have his parents here. It was like nobody could be here for us. So I was like, yeah,
the more the merrier.
You want to be here, that's fine. So I had in total, it was about 20 doctors and nurses, most of them doctors, most of them residents. And it was really emotional. Like I caught myself saying, well, we didn't really have a wedding. And Andy goes, no, we did. He goes,
Probably the most interesting wedding of all time.
Yeah. He's like, no, we did. He goes, it meant something. And so he cried, I cried, they were crying. Like it was a big deal. And we were literally the talk of the town for weeks. We were talk of the hospital. They were like, you were the couple that got married. And it was,
and it was kind of your kids that is,
yeah.
I mean, I know a very challenging moment for you and your family, but that's part of your story. And I think that that's really special.
Yeah.
And there's a picture when this releases, I'll definitely find the picture you shared. I think you have a little paper
They
veil,
made my veil. They made my veil out of a paper pillowcase.
Yeah.
And they gave me flowers from the nurse's desk to hold.
I'll share it the day that this episode goes live so everyone can see your wedding. But it's true. You did have a wedding. And that's an incredible thing because the twins were born the next day?
Literally 12 hours later. We got married around 1. It was almost exactly 12 hours because it got towards about 11:30 midnight and Madison started to go into distress. So they were like, we can't wait. And I was going to have a C-section anyway, because I've had 2 before. And with just all the issues, we couldn't just wait for things to progress naturally. We had a emergency C-section. And I've had 2 before where I was in a OR room that I'm familiar with being in, as I've been in them before, work. And I am like, okay, normal OR room with them. One thing, a small team of people. No, there was a very large
Even
OR
with
room.
one, I remember it being 12 people with just a scheduled, non-emergent, standard classic.
Right.
A standard classic. The classic. There were still a lot of people in there.
It feels like a lot.
Yeah, they probably had. Did they each have a team? Did each of the babies get a whole team?
So Mason had a whole team.
Yep.
Madison had a whole team. I had a whole team. They have, they get me in there, and Andy gets in there a little bit later, but he comes in. But
all like suited up in his
Yeah.
painter's outfit. There's like zip up.
They've already like started doing stuff. And so it was really fast for him. It was like, bam, they were born. But with my blood pressure, they were giving me some medicine, but it was the same arm that had a blood pressure cuff on, and my vein blew. And I said, as they're, working on me, they're like, I go, hey, my arm really hurts. I go, can you check it? Because obviously my arms are like pinned down.
Yeah, you get strapped in. If you have never had a C-section, you're literally like kind of
like a T. Like
they don't want you to move.
Yeah.
Because your lower half is completely immobilized, but like they don't want you to move your arms. So you're kind of like straight jacket down.
Yeah. And so, my vein blew. So I had this big amount of fluid in my arm. And so they're like, the anesthesiologist is working on there. Meanwhile, they're like, hey, you've had C-sections before. They're like, they tell you about all the scar tissue you have down here? And I'm like, absolutely not. I don't even know what's going on right now. Like, no. They're like, oh, it's okay. It's all good. Nothing's wrong. And I'm like, okay. But also,
what the F is happening?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. 124, Mason was born in the morning, and he weighed about 2 pounds, 4 ounces. And he was so little. I just remember seeing him, and he's the only one that I saw. I did not see Maddie because she was in distress. They needed to get her to the NICU. They needed to take her right away.
Yeah.
So I never actually knew how much they weighed until after I had recovered a little bit and gotten up to the NICU. So I actually did not know anything about my babies for about 9 hours after
Oh my
they
gosh,
were born.
9 hours?
Yeah. I went to recovery. They had to address my arm issue. They had to give me this like antidote so that the skin wouldn't die in my arm.
Like, as if I needed something else to deal with. Are you kidding?
Yeah. So I'm dealing with that, right? My blood pressure is high still. So they're worried about that. And I finally, get my catheter out, and the next morning, and I eat something because I hadn't ate in like 36 hours. So I needed to eat, so I ate, and then I was like, okay, let's go up to the NICU. And it was surreal to see how little they were. And I was like if I balled my fist up, Madison's head was smaller than my fist, It was just so crazy to see them so tiny. I think I didn't really break down quite then. I was still kind of shocked seeing them like that. Definitely. I was there for 6 days. I was admitted into the hospital for 6 days. I knew I'd be in there for 3 at least, just because the C-section, and they want to make sure everything's okay.
Yeah.
But it was because of my blood pressure, not enough. I got put back on magnesium I ate that morning, and then not that night. I don't know. It wasn't very long. I got like 12 hours to eat food. And then I had to go another like 36 hours without eating because they had to put me back on the magnesium again to try to get my blood pressure down. And so since I was on magnesium, I was bedridden. I could not go up and see the babies.
Was Andy allowed to go up there?
Yeah, he could go. He went up before me. He was going back and forth. And initially when they were first born, he got to go with them. They were like, do you want to go with? And so he got to go with the babies. He goes, do you want me to stay with you or do you want me to go with them? I go, you go with them. So he went up, but he felt very overwhelmed because since they were trying to get them stabilized. So the breathing tubes and the IVs and all that. And so he felt like he was just in the way. He was like, I know I'm not. They kept talking to me and like saying it, like explaining things. He's like, but I felt so overwhelmed. He's like, so he actually saw them, made sure that they were getting taken care of. And then he actually came back.
Well, I'm sure he's worried about you too.
Yeah.
As you've just gone through surgery and your arm is like about to fall off. And
yeah.
So I'm sure he's also worried and about you as well. And, so you're there for 6 days, and then they were there for 3 months. A long time.
Yeah. Mason was there longer than Madison. So they were born at 27 weeks and 4 days. And Mason got released right at gestation, like 40 weeks. So he was there for 13 weeks, and Madison was there for 12. she got released like 1 week before Mason.
Yeah.
Mason had breathing problems. They both went through a gamut of things. They had holes in their hearts that didn't want to close. They had they were on oxygen, obviously, and we had to get them up and feeding. So it always started so small. I breastfed and I pumped the whole time they were in the hospital. They had a Ronald McDonald house that I got to stay at. So I stayed
can you
there.
explain like what that process is? Because you're at this point also an hour away from your house. So you're at the specialist hospital, you're an hour away. So you're trying to manage also 2 kids at home and 2 of your babies that are in the NICU. So could you talk about like a little bit about the process, the Ronald McDonald house, how you were splitting time between all of that?
Right. Yeah. The hospital had a very great support system. I think they had a care coordinator who worked with me and getting me help with if I needed to see anybody. Do you need to talk to somebody? And I did. I did see a counselor. They had support groups. You could join groups with other NICU families. So that was always great. And then on top of that, the resources that they had, there were grants that you could apply for to get reimbursed for travel expenses for going back and forth, and food. They would give you gift cards to go get food.
It's not like you're cooking. It's not like you're trying to be cooking.
And then you could apply. They had a couple of different housing places that you could apply for. And I applied for both and I got into both, but they were like, you can pick whichever one you want.
Yeah.
Well, I picked the Ronald McDonald house, and it was a 15-minute walk, literally like a 2-minute drive. Yeah, it was right basically on campus, on the hospital campus grounds. I would walk on nice days just to get out and walk, but I could stay there. They had a communal kitchen. There would be restaurants that would drop off food. You could sign up for like a meal train thing where they would provide meals for you on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So that was honestly a blessing. I would say that I was there 3 to 4 nights a week. I would stay overnight there. And then the others, I would come home, and every week was different. It really depended on what was going on with my older girls and our care, because we had a lot of family support and they helped with my kids. And obviously Andy, he would go back. He did not get to be there very often.
With
work stuff, and then being there for our older girls. So I was mainly the person who was in the NICU.
Yep.
He would come up once every few weeks, really just for like a day. It was so much. Like I could probably do a whole nother episode with you about this. Like honestly, there's so much. I would say if you ever go through this situation, just reach out to the hospital, because they know what kind of support you can get. The Ronald McDonald House was like amazing for us. Like I don't know how else. Like I know that there are families who stay literally in the NICU. Like they have beds in certain rooms and you could stay in there, which if I had to have, I would have, of course. But in the beginning, it's so hard. It's so hard to figure everything out. Like, where am I going to be? Especially if you have other kids. And
that seems like it was a lot, because you're an hour away trying to manage what's happening with Avery and Harper. And it's amazing that you have a lot of family support and Andy was there, but still you're the mom, and I'm sure your heart was being kind of torn in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
I mean, I give you so much credit for showing up at even 1% during these times, because I'm sure it was extremely difficult to be in that position.
Well, and the nurses, they were always so like, hey, if you need a break, go take a break. Like you like, as great as it is, you do not have to be there 24/7. Like, and in the beginning, it felt like I had to be there. I would get there in the morning and I would spend 12 to 13 hours in that room. Yeah. Like I would go get coffee or I would go grab food.
Very draining.
And what you don't realize is you're always on edge, because you're hearing those monitors go off and they're going off and they're going off. And eventually you learn, okay, it's fine. They're going to come back out of it, and they do. But there'd be times where 7 people would rush to my baby's bedside. And sometimes I felt like I shut down in ways. I would just go through the motions in a lot of ways. But then I'd be driving in the car, that hour-long car ride. Something would set me off and I just start falling in the car, and it'd be
Yeah.
like,
Almost like a
oh,
safe space for
yeah,
you to finally kind of process
yeah.
alone. And I think you do a really good job of advocating this in general and now postpartum, but it's taking care of you too, as much as
Hmm.
you can. And of course, the maternal instinct is to want to be there for those 13-hour days. But if you're not also taking care of yourself, I'm so glad to hear that you utilize the counselors, or even that you
Hmm.
cried in the car, like normalize crying in the
Yeah,
car first and
yeah.
foremost, or the shower or the grocery store, wherever the hell you want to cry. But I think you really advocate for yourself in that way, because if you're trying to be stoic 100% of the time and not taking care of yourself and not letting yourself process, like that's not going to
Hmm.
bode well for you either. And you're not going to be able to
Mm.
show up. Eventually that's going to catch up to you. And I really
Well,
admire that you preach that. And you're like, this
yeah.
is hard and I let myself feel X, Y, and Z. And this is how I'm trying to take care of myself. It's not a perfect science, but it's important.
Well, even with me trying, it did catch up to me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
eventually, like I did do my best, but I developed that hypothyroidism. My
Yeah.
body was in full fight or flight mode for a very long time. Because even when they came home, Mason was on oxygen for 3 months after he came home. And Madison and him both had follow up appointments almost every week. We were in the doctors multiple times a
They
week. I
still have a
was,
lot of
yeah,
appointments and
yeah.
specialty. We always lament on the fun of specialty pharmacies and the how much
Hmm.
fun it is to deal with them, because I know that they were on some medications and you're dealing with insurance and trying to get
Yeah.
them to ship stuff. So they were still, even once they were home, you still weren't fully out of that.
Mm.
And I don't know if you've felt now like you're fully out of that.
No, I don't. Like, I still feel like when I go to a special, like we have on Tuesday in a couple of days, we have a cardiology appointment.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel like they're going to be like, okay, we have to do something. Like, okay, we have to, he's like, we're still worried about that hole in his heart. So, or like, is it going to be closed yet? Like, hopefully it is. But the last time they were there, they're like, well, might have to do some intervention. And all I can think about is getting admitted again to a hospital and
Yeah.
how traumatizing, like even still, like just going to these appointments is like, okay, you're still waiting for that other shoe to drop.
And that's a
And
year, almost a year out.
with really relatively healthy babies for being born almost 13 weeks early, like,
Yeah.
and so it that trauma from all of that like doesn't just go away. You might feel like you're doing great, and then all of a sudden the one thing sets you off, like, and that's the weird funny thing about trauma is that you don't know that you're really over it like ever. I don't think, like, you're still.
I don't know if it ever really goes away. I think in a way it's like grief. I mean, it
Yeah.
is, you went through a
Yes.
lot and it doesn't get maybe better. It gets very different.
Hmm.
And now you're presented with different challenges than you were directly after they were born versus when they came
Hmm.
home. Like, what would you say was the most helpful for you if someone else is going through something like a NICU stay or a baby that may have some medical components? Like, what was the best thing that you either did or that people did for you that was really helpful?
Well, during their NICU journey, I would always be there for rounds if I could.
Mm-hmm.
Rounds were a great way to hear exactly what they were doing, what they were planning on doing. And I could ask any question that I had, and they never made me feel stupid. They always made me feel seen and heard. That was a good way for me to, and I would always recommend a journal too, like
Mm.
write down everything that you talk about. And then if you're by yourself and you don't have anybody to ask at the time, write down your question, because I'll tell you the next day you'll probably forget
Yeah.
and you won't ask. And it's okay to ask questions. And I would fully recommend asking any question. Preferred nurse list. So if you have nurses that you do not like, you should never feel bad about saying, I don't really want them on my team. Is there any way that you can put that down? And they will. And not to say that they were bad nurses. They were just nurses that rubbed me the wrong way or
Yeah.
just made me not feel seen. And so I was like, well, I don't want that in this situation. Like, I already have enough going on. So
Yeah.
never feel bad. Speak up. And if you can't say it to their face, wait till the next shift and be like, hey, do you know that nurse? can you put them on the list that I do not want to work with them?
Yeah. Like find your people. Yeah.
And we would get a lot of the same nurse because I'd have a preferred list, and they tried their best to get those people in there to take care of us. And it was even better when they could put my twins together because they were separate and even in separate wings of the hospital at one point. And so that was really hard, but they really did their best to get them together. So if they are separate, knowing that it's okay to split your time and not feel guilty, because there was times where I felt bad that I couldn't be there for the other twin because I was there here, which is the same thing as not being able to be there for my older kids. So, you're always going to feel that guilt in some way or form, but knowing that there's nothing to feel guilty for. And it's really hard to tell yourself that, but like write it down in your journal 18 million times if you need to, just to like get it into your head. Like, it's okay.
Important. Also, if someone's listening to this and they maybe know someone that is going through this, tell them that. Tell them that it's okay to do your best and your best is enough. Like this is also a really good reminder to someone that wants to be supportive of someone going through something like this. That's a great thing to remind them of and tell them.
We had another thing is if you are somebody who knows somebody going through this, like just doing random things. Like I know that you had somebody do this for you too, but dropping off food, literally just drop it on their porch. If you know somebody's home, you're like, hey, I left a casserole on your porch. We had people.
And you don't need to hang out. Yeah, you don't need to talk to me.
We had people send us gift cards. We had our neighbor mow our grass. So many random gifts of kindness in so many different ways. Our friend inviting us all over to go to her pool, just to get out and let our other kids have fun and play.
Feel normal for a sec. Yeah.
And also to like not feel guilty that you're out having fun while your baby might be going through this, because they're in good hands.
Yeah.
They're getting cared for exactly how they should be. And they will call you if you need to be there, they will call you. And I called every day. I called them at 2 a.m. one day saying, hey, how's the blood pressure going? How is the feeding going? What's going on? I had to pump, I was pumping anyway. I was up. I was like, I know that they're up. I know that there's somebody there like right now taking care of my kid. Like I could call. They connected me to the nurse and we chatted and like, hey, how did their feeds go today? Like what's good? Like, tell me more. And they would literally break down everything. Part of NICU stuff is you just can't be there all the time. It's okay to step away.
And like you said, your body did rebel eventually. Yeah. And I know you're working through some of that stuff now and showing up for yourself where you can. It's really easy, I think, as a mom to put everyone else first. And you had that on steroids because of the situations that you were in. And I'm just really proud of you for how you show up through the really hard stuff. I think you talked about this the other day too, where someone kept saying like, you're so brave, or like, you're super mom, you're
so strong.
Yeah. And you're like, well, I didn't have an option, but
I hated being told it. They were meaning well. You're so strong. And you want to be like, oh, thanks. But like, also like, I don't want to be strong. I don't want to deal with all this. Like, I have to be strong. And anybody going through it, like there's no choice. Like you just do it. Like you go through the emotions some days and you just do it. And it is human. You're just human and you do your best. And it looks glamorized in some ways. I think you're like, everybody's like, I couldn't do it. Yes, you could. You could do it. I promise.
You just haven't had to.
Not everybody can say they had to go through something like this because it is hard. But seeing they're the strongest humans I've ever met. Like
they've been through the most.
Kids, yeah. So like miracles. So I'm not strong. They're strong. You're strong together. So it really is. It's hard, but I was made to be their mom. I was made to be their mom. So.
And they're the cutest.
Yeah.
And they're the sweetest, cutest. wiggliest. And Heather and I joke that our kids are just like feral at all times now. And just like,
sometimes it's hard to remind myself that they were premature, because Mason, he is everywhere. And I'm like, God, you are just like, he's like wanting to walk. He is almost a year old, but he's really 9 months adjusted.
Yeah.
So like when you look at them, and that's something hard for me to wrap my brain around. I look at them, I'm like, okay, you're almost a year old, but like, you're not to me. Like you are, but you're not. And it's really awesome that gotten so far, but they're fun. And twin life with 2 older kids. I never, some days I'm like, I don't know how I did it, but we made it through the bedtime.
What did I even do today?
It's
happened?
A blur.
I know, but you show up really beautifully. And if you want to tell everyone like where to find you, I highly recommend following Heather. She's funny. She gives you the real. She talks, you talk about a lot of things, health and mothering, obviously pregnancy, postpartum, but a lot about like confidence and body image and like owning your power. So where can people find you?
Yeah. So it's lifestyles_with Heather.
And I will tag her directly also in the show notes so you can go and find Heather and all the good things. And it has been so cool. We've been connected for way before these babies. I don't even remember how.
I think I found you because of fitness.
So it's been an absolute privilege just getting to now have you in my circle and obviously in the tent. And
happy to be here.
I am so appreciative of your vulnerability and just willingness to share and talk about what you went through, because I think it's important. So everyone go find Heather, give her a shout. She is just a really fun, good human being. Heather, thank you so much. And we'll chat soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Welcome to My 10 podcast. I hope you had as much fun listening as I do recording. I am so happy to have you here, and see you next episode.